I kind of messed up. I started on a story, and like the drift case that I am, pardon me, I got diverted away from the subject or the story I was going to say, and never came back to it. Now this was the stupidest thing I ever heard of. Okay, all right, some molders made a sling or a lifting sling. Okay, kind of like the one I'm going to make. Might have been a little bit different, but this just goes to prove how I don't know exactly what the circumstances were. This might have been a brand new inspector. It might have been an inspector who had been an expert in one area and got suddenly exposed to wire rope sockets and inspecting those. Okay, from all the years that I made wire rope sockets, and any of the guys that was in my shop, the experience was that the inspector would come in and look, and wherever the metal ended, he made absolutely sure. And yeah, there wasn't any women at the time. Made absolutely sure that none of the broomed out pieces of the metal were sticking beyond the edge of the metal, that wherever the ledge is or the thickness ends right here. All right, they make sure that there's none of that sticking out. All right, they would then invest or examine the base here and make sure that the broomed out, the end of the area where it started brooming out ended right here. Okay, that was another bit of criteria. And that that was before it got tested, and they witnessed the testing. Now when they were being tested for us, all right, it was fairly easy. All the ships, we just gave these to the riggers, and the riggers got some kind of lifting device set up. Now, most likely it was probably the ship's crane, which is kind of a huge crane, relatively speaking, for being on a ship. And they would have a weight on deck, giant lead weight or a steel weight on deck. They would attach one, let's say they have some cables on the weights. The cable would be run through something like this and be attached to the other end, the other eye of the weight that's like down here. This would come up, they would bring that up to where it just barely got tight, the cable here, and then they would then slowly raise. I mean, really slow. It's like an inch every minute, maybe. That's how slow it was. And just bring it off the ground just to where they can see the sunlight underneath the weight. Stop, let it hang the prescribed time, and there was a time that they had to give it plenty of time. And then once the time was up, they would lower it back down, and the inspector would come and look and see if there's any sign of the wires being pulled out as the zinc. Okay, now, and that would be like pretending that there's a cable connecting the, if there would be a drag here, there would be an upward pull here, and if anything's going to go wrong, something will pull out, or it'll pull out enough that it'll be different from when they looked at it last down here. Okay, if it looks like it even pulled a quarter of an inch, that means that it broke loose from the zinc conical wedge that's in here. Okay, and then it was rejected. All right. There is nothing in the instruction that says that zinc, along with being bonded to the individual broomed out wires, is also required to bond to the inside of this socket. There's nothing in there. But this inspector thought that if it's going to get bonded to the individual wires, the broomed out wires, then it has to be bonded to the inside of this, right? That's what that person thought. I'm guessing that's what they thought, because what he did next was not only not part of the job order, or not part of the QA package, but it was absolutely the stupidest thing I ever heard of. He picked up one end of a cable, got a hammer, had to have been kind of a sledge, because because these are really, when they pull them up, they're not just laying in there, but they're seated. They're like squeezed into a smaller area, only slightly, maybe a 1/16 of an inch or something. They're seated in there, and then from that point on, the opposing pressures hold it in place like that. Okay, they don't wiggle out, because every time they use the lifting cable or lifting sling, they're always pulling like this. Always. You can't push anything with this, okay? It is always a pulling force, okay? This horse's rear took a hammer, banged on this, and when he got done banging up enough, the wedge that was in here, the conical wedge of zinc and steel, came out and was sticking out in here, and he failed the job. It passed the weight test. It passed the pre-weight test examination, but because he did something that wasn't called for and could not have been could not have been worked against, he did something that ruined the cable, and the cable had to be all done all over again. I don't know what I would have done, but I damn sure wouldn't have just let this goddamn fool do that again on any of my jobs, because there's not a single freaking cable job that would have survived that. That's destructive testing. That's not NDT, which is non-destructive testing. That's destructive testing, because once you bang that out with a hammer, it's no longer seated, and it has to be redone. Okay? No job would ever pass if any damn fool hit it with a hammer in that manner. Okay? Don't ask me what the final disposition of this was. Whether this guy was read the riot act by the commander, by the repair boss, or the division officer. But it can't possibly have survived that one occasion. Okay? This is a lot of work to put these on. Physically, each individual step is not terribly hard, but doing it step by step by step, and not missing any steps, and not screwing up the previous step by getting the wires dirty by touching it with your hands, or touching it with a greasy glove, or using a dirty hose clamp to try and pull the wires together. If you don't screw up everything, it all comes together neat as a pin, and they'll all pass the pull inspection and testing procedure, the weight tests, and it'll last for decades. Okay? And I'm sorry I got drifty. I got, like any other story that an old man tells, he got sidetracked very easily. Okay, so please, if you're going to be an inspector, don't hit the goddamn socket with a hammer. It's not ever gonna be hit with a hammer in actual usage, and there's no justifiable reason to put force on that cable the opposite direction in which it's gonna actually be used. Okay, please, you NDT inspector, don't do that. All right, and until next time, and yes, this finally is going to be a little bit short, a short video. Until next time, Liberty Call.